Hi, Ashley.
Hello, Candy.
And Happy New Year, because it's right around the corner.
Yes, it is.
So guys, we are not actually here this week. We have something special planned for you for this episode.
We do.
But we wanted to give you a brief little introduction first. So what's going to happen is we are actually going to be re-sharing with you our White Christmas episodes through her magical editing skills. Ashley has put together parts 1 and 2, and so that's going to play in a minute. But beforehand, we just wanted to share with you something special that will accompany and we hope make this episode a little more special.
Right. It's a little tie-in for you. So the reason we chose this particular rewind episode is because I took a solo field trip. Well, solo myself and Brian. It was sans you. Unfortunately, you couldn't make it. But there was this thing that I stumbled across called the Holly Jolly Days at the Behringer Crawford Museum. And I thought, well, that fits with our podcast. But something else that fit with our podcast really well is they had an exhibit about White Christmas.
Nice.
And this is directly from their website. It says, rekindle memories and make new ones with the magic and merriment of the iconic 1954 film White Christmas at the Behringer Crawford Museum this holiday season. Irving Berlin's White Christmas, the exhibit, opens November 12th, so it's been open for a while, with costumes created by the legendary designer Edith Head, which we still need to do an episode about, and worn by Kentucky legend Rosemary Clooney, Bing Crosby, Vera Ellen, Danny Kaye, among other stars. Studio props, sheet music, cast members' personal memorabilia, and more will be on display. So we will be sure to include the Behringer Crawford Museum in our show notes so that if you would like to, in this week between Christmas and New Year, if you're looking for something to do, I highly recommend visiting this museum. It was only about $8 for admission. You could stay as long as it was open.
It's very reasonable.
Very reasonable. And it was so cool because it had something for everybody. It had toy trains for kids. It had a holiday Barbie collection if you were interested in that. And it had this exhibit with all of these White Christmas costumes and memorabilia. And I took tons of photographs, which I will put on our Facebook page I'll put on our show notes. So that will be fresh. But the reason we went on this particular day is because Heather French Henry was going to be there giving a talk about all of the costumes because she is actually curator of the Rosemary Clooney house.
Which I did not know until you shared that with me.
Right. She has made it kind of, and this really moved me because she said one of her reasons for wanting to do this Rosemary Clooney house and to purchase, so she purchased Rosemary Clooney's old home. It's kind of turned it into a museum. And it has been her thank you because the second phone call she received, if you all don't remember, Heather French Henry was our Kentucky Miss America in the year 2000. The second phone call she got was from Rosemary Clooney because Rosemary Clooney, according to Heather, said she knew what it was like to kind of come from a very small town and be thrust into the national spotlight and how hard that could be. So she called her every single week that she was Miss America that whole year, the year 2000. Amazing. And this was Heather's way of just repaying that kindness and kind of keeping Rosemary's legacy going. So I thought that was a beautiful story.
I love that story.
And their friendship was so beautiful. But I was so impressed. She walked in there and she gave an off-the-cuff talk about all of these costumes for 35 solid minutes. I mean, and
she knows her stuff.
She did. And it was supposed to be something where she would kind of walk around the rooms and talk to everybody, but there were so many people there to see her. It was standing room only. So she, from memory, just said, well, in this room, you're going to see this. And then moving into this room, you're going to see this. And she went through the whole exhibit from memory and told you little bits and tidbits about almost every piece of costuming, which I thought was, I was so impressed by her. And we got to meet her afterwards and she was so kind and so down to earth and all the good things you've heard about her are true. She's a wonderful person.
That just sounds like an amazing experience for you guys, but also what a great exhibit. I would be so interested to see all of the costumes and that memorabilia.
It was a very, very nice museum. I wish we could have spent more time there, but we had somewhere else to be that evening, but I highly recommend going there.
Yeah, and the way you described it, you could send the kids over here. Yeah. They could look at the toy trains and the Barbies, and you could be over here in this exhibit.
Looking at all the exhibits. And can I just say, Vera Ellen was so tiny, 18-inch waist.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is fascinating, and I love that as a tie-in to this Rewind episode. To switch gears.
Yes.
Just a bit.
To play the sad music.
Yes. I also wanted to take this opportunity, we both did actually, to offer a brief correction. So here's our correction corner. I realized right after recording the episode on our A Christmas Story sequel, yes, that I misspoke. I forgot a detail that was super important. And I think I even said it. It was during my cat's eye story. And I remember commenting, I'm not sure if I have my details right. I didn't. As soon as I got home, I was like, oh my goodness. I left out my dear friend Jennifer. We actually went to elementary school together for a few years. And then we both moved away and we reconnected in college. And we have been friends ever since, and her husband Rocky, they're both dear friends. And so I'm listening back to my telling of the story and realize the most important detail is that Jennifer was the one who found that game for us, went out of her way, went on a search. And so big shout out to Jennifer. I'm so sorry that I forgot that in my first telling. And by the way, love you and Rocky. All right. Thank you.
My correction is that I remember I very pridefully, pride goeth before a fall, but I very pridefully said, well, they had a continuity error because the little girl was wearing her eye patch, then she wasn't, and then she was re-wearing it when they did the thing with the stump and the snowmobile. So on second watch, because I watched it again with Brian a few days after you and I did that watch for the show, I realized that the reason she wasn't wearing it is because her brother was drawing a white, like with paint, he was drawing an eyeball on the eye patch for her. So that's why she didn't have it on.
It was intentional.
It was completely intentional, and I completely just
There was a great joke there.
Yeah, it was a great joke, and it went over my head. Now, her eyes did look perfectly fine. They weren't bloodshot, nothing like that. So I could die on the hill and say, oh, it was continuity. I'm not going to. I'm just going to say I was full on wrong. They knew what they were doing. I should have known they knew what they were doing. So yes, that's my correction. So sorry to those lovely people who made a perfect film when I said it. There's one problem. No, there's not. There's no problems.
Well, now that we have that off our chest.
Yes, and we can enter the new year unencumbered.
That's right.
Yes.
I think the only thing left to do is just to say to our listeners, guys, we love you. We hope you have had an amazing holiday season so far, and we are wishing you the best New Year ever.
Yes, and as the old joke goes, see you next year. But before we do leave you, I have a little surprise for you guys, and we have an audio clip to play before we go into the episode. So enjoy.
Hi everyone, this is Heather French Henry, curator of the Rosemary Clooney House Museum in Augusta, Kentucky, which houses the famous White Christmas costume collection. I'm delighted you're listening to Candy and Ashley today on the Scandal Water podcast as they highlight Irving Berlin's White Christmas, one of the most beloved holiday classic films. My family is delighted to add some extra sparkle to everyone's holidays by showcasing our White Christmas costume collection at the Behringer Crawford Museum this season, now through January 8th. Each holiday season, we travel the collection to museums across the country, which allows us to bring the collection to thousands of fans who may never get to visit it at the Rosemary Clooney House Museum. In the collection, you'll view amazing costumes like the famous Blue Sisters dresses, costumes worn by Vera Ellen, Rosemary Clooney, Bing Crosby, and more. Along with the costumes, we also have other production pieces and vintage lobby posters and cards. So come on out and see the amazing collection at the Behringer Crawford Museum in Covington, Kentucky, beautifully situated at the top of DeVue Park overlooking the Ohio River Valley. We hope you enjoy this spectacular collection as part of their Holly Jolly Days. So, from all of us at the Rosemary Clooney House Museum to you, Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year.
Welcome to Scandal Water, where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
and Ashley,
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1. Stories and scandal water. It's where you need to be. Stories and scandal water. Let's pour you a cup of tea.
Hey, Ashley.
Hi, Candy.
I am excited about our new recording studio
Isn't
here.
it beautiful?
It is.
I tried to set the tone for you. I feel like it looks very cozy.
For our listeners, we normally record in Ashley's office, but she has moved us into her library area, and it is just filled with ambiance. It is so pretty, all kinds of books and nicely lit lamps, and it's just a really nice space.
It's very cozy.
All right. Well, are we ready to jump into another one of our holiday episodes?
I am. I'm very excited about this one because this is the one I got to know about, and I did a little bit of homework. I think we're going to have a very interesting conversation.
Awesome. I love it. To start, Ashley, I'm going to test your knowledge again.
Okay.
I do this to you a lot.
You do. You could tell. People can tell you're a teacher.
But I thought that our listeners might like to play along on this. So here's what I'm going to request.
Okay.
Okay. What we're going to do is the game. I'm making up this game.
Okay.
But it's based on ones we've seen on TV, of course. Anyway, it's test your lyric knowledge.
Oh.
So I'm going to give you a couple of lines of a song, and I'm going to ask you to give me the next line or two to see if you can continue it.
All right.
But I'm going to ask you not to jump in really fast, because in case our listeners want to try to do it themselves, we'll kind of put just a little pause there, and then they can see if they can come up with it, or if they want to hit pause on their device, they could do that. But I thought it might be fun.
I'm all for it. Let's try it.
All right. Here we go. Sisters, sisters, there were never such devoted sisters.
Something about somebody trying to separate us and they can't. I don't know.
Okay. I think this one's hard.
It is hard.
Okay. The next two lines are, never had to have a chaperone.
No, sir. I'm here to keep my eye on her.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yes.
Here's the second one. When I'm worried and I can't sleep, I count my blessings instead of sheep, and I fall asleep counting my blessings when my bankroll.
What? I could have told you if you hadn't kept going. When my bankroll is looking slim, I don't know.
Okay. This is really hard.
It is hard.
All right. When my bankroll is getting small, I think of when
I had none at all? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I
fall asleep counting my blessings?
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Number 3. Snow, 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 snow. It won't be long before we'll all be there with snow. Snow, snow.
I'll wash my hair with snow.
You're very close. And that might be a second verse. I don't know.
I think it is. She says something and then it's, I'll wash my hair with snow.
Yeah. The way I have it right here is to finish out that line. It was snow, snow. I want to wash my hands, my face, and hair with snow. Snow. I long to clear a path and lift a spade of snow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've done terribly. This is shameful.
Okay, well, here's the last one. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know.
Oh, okay. Treetops glisten and children listen
To hear.
sleigh bells in the snow. Right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay, all right.
I redeemed it a
job.
little bit.
Okay. So you already knew the topic, but
I did.
surely by now our listeners probably have already figured out as well that our topic today is White Christmas. Yes, yes. I mean, one of the classics.
It is very much.
Ashley and I had talked about this because it is such a well-known, classic, beloved film. We thought we would make this particular episode a big one. In fact, we're anticipating we're probably going to have to break this into 2 parts because we're going to start at the very beginning. We're not just going to jump into the movie. We're going to back it up and we're going to talk about how this
Origin story.
Right. From the beginning. How did this whole thing come about? So I am going all the way back to the song and Irving Berlin.
Yes.
All right, here we go. Do you already have a lot of background knowledge about the song, Ashley, or the composer?
No, not in this case. I don't know why he wrote it. For some reason, I'm thinking maybe he wrote it in July. I don't know why I'm thinking that. But no, I don't know. That's why I'm kind of excited to know. The only thing I know about White Christmas is the film and also the play, which is why it's super shameful that I could not get those lyrics because I co-directed the play and of course I've seen the film.
But you didn't have to sing the songs or learn the
No,
songs, and that
no.
makes a difference.
It does.
Yeah, you have a lot more to think about when you're directing and producing.
It's true. Thanks for salvaging me.
All right, so let's talk about Irving Berlin. He was actually one of America's greatest composers. years. He was a Russian Jewish immigrant who could not read or write music notation,
No kidding.
but managed to compose over 1,000 songs. And several of the sources labeled him as being the person who was the foundation of our American songbook.
So he could not, say that again, he could not,
Read or write music notation.
meaning
So
he could not write music or read music.
I'm assuming, yes, that he did it by ear or that he...
See, I can't read music or write music either, but yet I'm not Irving Berlin. So this is a definite gift. I would like to have that talent, very specifically, but no, I don't have it.
Very impressive. He is known for songs such as Easter Parade, No Business Like Show Business, God Bless America, and of course, White Christmas. In fact, one of the articles pointed out that White Christmas is probably one of his simplest songs. There are only 54 words and only 67. He referred to it as now classic notes in that song, but it is one of the most popular Christmas songs of all time. There's a news anchor, Charles Osgood, many years ago was talking about this, and he is quoted as saying that White Christmas is Irving Berlin's most enduring legacy because, quote, no song captures the spirit of the season better than White Christmas.
Yeah, it really does. It's very, even though it's simple, it has beautiful imagery.
Oh, it does. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because some of the interviews were with Irving Berlin's daughter, Linda Emmett. And so she gave a lot of insights. Some of this came from her. Some of this came from a researcher who wrote a book about Irving Berlin. But here are some interesting things about him. First of all, they both pointed out, the author of this book and his daughter, that because he was a Russian Jew, Irving Berlin really didn't connect to Christmas as a religious holiday.
Okay.
His daughter, Linda, said, quote, I think for my father that Christmas was an American holiday more than anything else. It was certainly nothing he was exposed to say the least, in Russia. And so she explained that in her household, they were excited about Christmas. They had the Christmas tree, they had the Christmas stockings, the turkey, plum pudding, the whole deal, including what she called a general cheery atmosphere. And she said it was something that they as kids looked forward to tremendously. But again, because her father was a Russian Jewish immigrant, she said that for him, Christmas was not a religious holiday, it was a cultural one.
Yeah, there's not any religious lyrics in White Christmas.
No.
It's secular lyrics.
Yeah. In terms of what prompted it, there's actually a lot of mystery behind it. Linda does not know when or where her father wrote it. Nobody can pin it down.
Oh, I guess my July theory was totally wrong.
Well, but you never know, because here's what she said. She thinks it was written in either 1938 or 1939. She said possibly in Arizona or maybe in New York, or maybe he worked on it in both places. But a different theory that they put out was that Irving Berlin might have written it over Christmas 1937, which was when he was separated from his family working on a movie called Alexander's Ragtime Band. And so he was in Beverly Hills alone, away from his family.
That makes sense.
So some people think that's when he did it. Either way, everybody agrees that he originally wrote the song. He intended it to be for this Broadway musical review that was going to be about American holidays, and it never was produced. But Paramount Pictures liked that idea, later picked it up, and
Holiday Inn.
Later, yes,
Okay.
kind of turned into Holiday Inn.
Okay.
We'll get back to that one, of course, later. But we do know the one thing they agree on is that he wrote the song sometime in the late 30s, but it wasn't until later that something happened with it. So again, here's a nice quote. This is from the author Jody Rosen, who wrote the book White Christmas, The Story of an American Song. So Jody says, and it wasn't until a couple years later, over the Christmas season of 1940 into 1941, I believe, that he kind of took the song, the half-finished song, out of what he called his song trunk.
Oh, that's cute.
And it's great because several people mentioned this, that Irving Berlin would just start songs and he would tuck it away and then he would pull it out later when he wanted to use it.
I kind of have that in writing. I have little notebooks that I'll have ideas for, just an idea for a sketch or a couple lines or a line of dialogue. And then I just put them in this little notebook and I go back to them.
Yeah, it's like all these germs of ideas that you don't want to lose, so you have to capture them. But I love that. Well, I mean, I guess if you're going to compose 1,000 songs, you better have a lot of ideas,
have a trunk,
right? But anyway, so Rosen continues by saying, over that Christmas season that year, Berlin rewrote the lyric. And it was then, after he'd written it, that he came into his song publishing offices and announced to his musical secretary, I've just written a new song. Not only is it the best song I've ever written, it's the best song anybody's ever written. And it was a white Christmas.
He's very humble about it too.
Yeah. And then Jody Rosen went on to say that he felt one of the most surprising things was not just the popularity of White Christmas, but the fact that it was actually kind of a blues song. Like if you consider how it comes across, it's kind of melancholy.
It really is.
And they have a theory, several people have a theory about this. This was in many articles. Rosen is quoted as saying, I think this really makes it stand out amongst kind of chirpy seasonal standards, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Let It Snow. And he said, I think it's one of the reasons why people keep responding to it, because our feelings over the holiday season are ambivalent. So that the part that I was actually getting to, their theory about why it was melancholy is a lot of people think that it was because Berlin was thinking about his son, who had died on Christmas Day in 1928. He was only 3 weeks old. And so every year on December 25th, he and his wife would visit their baby's grave.
Oh, my goodness.
And so a lot of people think that White Christmas actually kind of is almost like a tribute to his son. And that's why it's so sad sounding.
That does make a lot of sense because the first lines are, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas just like the ones I used to know. And it's like, I think it's saying I'm dreaming of a way of things the way they used to be. So maybe prior to the baby's death when life was happy and had promise and things like that. Maybe,
yeah. To finish out this quote from Rosen, he said, the kind of deep secret of the song may be that it was Berlin responding in some way to his melancholy about the death of his son. So what you said would fit with that. Here's the part I had no idea. I just always thought White Christmas, the song, came out in the movie White Christmas. Well, long before any of that, White Christmas, the song, premiered on the radio at Christmas time in 1941, just 18 days after Pearl Harbor.
Oh.
The song aired on Bing Crosby's radio show.
I was going to ask, was Bing the first one to sing it?
Yes,
that was a meeting of magic right there.
Exactly. And so Bing's radio show was the Kraft Music Hall radio show because, of course, it was sponsored by Kraft. And the exact date was December 25th, 1941. So that's when the song first came out. But it was a little limited, right? It was over the radio. It wasn't like it immediately sprung into all this popularity. But 8 months later was when moviegoers got to see and hear Bing Crosby perform the song in the film Holiday Inn, which was another performance that elevated the song, of course, to the next level.
I actually saw the DVD for Holiday Inn at the dollar store yesterday.
Oh, did you?
I was in there just getting a couple groceries, and I walked past their Christmas DVD rack, and Holiday Inn was there. And it struck me, and maybe we'll talk about this, how odd it is that the same song was performed in two different films that he was in, and how the films are sort of the same but not, because it was Fred Astaire. I read the back of it to remind myself it was Fred Astaire and him and Marjorie Reynolds maybe, but they were fighting over this girl. She was very beautiful, but then it was an inn that Bing Crosby's character owned instead of General Waverly. And they just performed on the holidays.
Have you seen the movie?
Long time ago.
Okay.
Yes.
I've never seen it.
Some people prefer it to White Christmas.
Well, I looked up a summary of Holiday Inn since I had not seen the movie myself. And here's what it said on Wikipedia. Jim Hardy, played by Bing Crosby, and Ted Hanover, who's played by Fred Astaire, have been vaudeville partners for many years. But when Ted announces that he and Jim's girlfriend, dancer Lila Dixon, are going to set off on their own, Jim decides the time has come to retire. He buys himself a farmhouse in New England and settles into the country life, but soon realizes that he has an opportunity to do something special. He decides to open his inn to the public, but only on major holidays. Things are going well for him until his old partner Ted shows up and sets his sight on Jim's new friend, Linda Mason, who is, as you said, played by Marjorie Reynolds.
Oh, I got the name right.
You did get it right. Yeah. A different summary was helpful to me because it gave a different little twist to it. Here's another short summary. Holiday Inn, however, centers on Jim, a man who has left show business behind to settle down on his farmhouse in Connecticut. Looking to shake things up with a bit of song and dance, Jim meets Linda, a talented school teacher. Together they turn the farmhouse into a fabulous inn with dazzling performances to celebrate every holiday from Thanksgiving to the 4th of July. And I like this summary because as I was doing my research, that was one of the things that I kept noticing was they talked about how one of the differences between the two movies, because that was a point that came up, was there were so many similarities, but one of the differences was that White Christmas will be so focused on the Christmas holiday, whereas this one actually was almost like a musical critical review of all the holidays.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
thought, well, that's a key contrast there.
Also, as someone who has been on the ground floor of founding a theater, it just brings me no end of delight when it's just like, oh, an innkeeper and a talented teacher decided to get together and do these shows. And it's like, it was immediately a success. And we toiled for years, you know. It's just like, oh, great. Mickey and Judy put on a show in a barn and it was great.
If only life did work that way.
No, it doesn't.
Wouldn't that be great? Well, before we continue, why don't we take a little break?
Sounds good to me.
Hi, I'm Matt C. Adams of Hired Hand Studios. When my talented and knowledgeable friends Ashley and Candy asked me if I'd be interested in helping them with some artwork for their podcast, I was more than happy to lend a hand. If you ever find yourself needing a hand, artistically speaking, then you should hire me, the Hired Hand. You can reach me through the Hired Hand Studios Facebook page or send me an email at matthhs@gmail.com. That's matthhs, as in Hired Hand Studios, at gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you.
So, as Ashley had already said, of course, this movie also introduced the song White Christmas. And, both movies are going to end up having this song in it. It did take it to a broader audience. It was originally intended to be sung by someone else.
Really?
One of the female leads.
I bet Bing was like, no, this is my song. Check my contract. The very fine print says my song.
Well, it did not say who decided, but they did mention that Berlin gave the song to Crosby and that it became a classic. And, oh, this is so cute. Irving Berlin ended up winning an Academy Award for the song, the version that's in Holiday Inn. And this is so cool. It is the only time in history that an Oscar presenter ever opened an envelope and read his own name as the winner. He presented his Oscar to himself.
They must not have thought he was going to win.
I have no idea.
Or they thought this is going to be the cutest ruse ever.
But it was adorable.
That is
because he opens the envelope.
Yeah.
He's the winner, and it says that he joked with the audience and said, "I'm glad to present the award. I've known him for a long time."
That's cute.
Yeah. But here's what I found really interesting. It was not actually even the performance in this movie that's what propelled White Christmas the song to the success that it ultimately gained. It was a more unexpected audience that did it.
Who?
The military.
Ah, the military.
The men in uniform. Yeah. Jody Rosen, again, the author of that book. Here's his quote. "It was," meaning the song, "kind of the centerpiece of the film. The center," he said. But critics didn't take much notice of it. And it was only when Armed Forces Radio began to play the song overseas, and for American troops who found its images of the kind of Christmas on the home front so appealing. It was 1942, the first winter that American troops had spent overseas. So these images of snowy American, New Englandy Christmases really spoke to the longing, nostalgia, and homesickness of the troops for their homeland and for the sweethearts and wives and mothers and fathers they'd left behind. It was the enthusiasm of these troops that really propelled the song and made it a hit.
That's neat. And it also makes a lot of sense why when they went on and did White Christmas, the film, that they started him singing it at the very top of it in a military situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, the war ends up playing a huge part in that movie. We're going to come back to that a little bit more later. But it was interesting. The song was requested so much by the troops that Bing felt a little uncomfortable about it. Remember, he was great about doing all those USO appearances overseas. And so he would go over there, he would perform for them. And they requested it so much that he said he was hesitant to do it because he was afraid it would cause such nostalgic yearning, those were his words, among the men that it would make them sad. But then this is what he said in an interview. He said, "Heaven knows I didn't come that far to make them sad.
Yeah.
For this reason, several times I tried to cut it out of the show, but these guys just hollered for it." Yeah. That's what ended up really pushing it forward and making it the huge hit that the song became. In fact, one interview I saw talked about this woman who went out with her uncle and they bought the sheet music to that song right before he went overseas himself. And then after he was killed in the war, that was one of the things that she kept because it was meaningful.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it was.
So it sounds like, from what I'm gathering, it sounds like from the origin of the writing of the song, like sometimes when you pour your emotions into something that transcends it. So if indeed he did write this out of grief and of times gone by for the death of his son, it sounds like that, whatever chord he struck of melancholy and of longing, the same people who are in that situation of loss and losing friends and missing their family and missing the way things used to be, it just resonated. It struck that same human emotional chord.
Absolutely. I'm kind of spoiler alerting, but this song has sold over like 50 million copies. It has been recorded by
It was the
hundreds
number
of
one
artists.
song up until Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You. It was the number one single, I think. Christmas single. I think Candle in the Wind maybe have overtaken it.
I think you're right. It was, I believe,
Elton John.
Elton John, thank you. It does say in my notes that it's the best-selling Christmas song of all time and also the best-selling single ever according to the Guinness Book of World Records.
Really? And I thought Mariah's took that over.
Well, maybe my source was outdated.
Maybe.
We'll have to check that one.
Okay, we will.
Okay. Should we take a break before we go on?
Sure, let's do it.
And we are back.
So during the break, I looked it up. As of November 2016, the holiday single with the most digital downloads is Mariah Carey's 1994 song, All I Want for Christmas Is You. However, Bing still holds the record for the best-selling Christmas single. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad we figured that out.
Yes, that would have bothered me.
So, as we said, White Christmas was such a hit that Irving Berlin was inspired to write an entire movie about it.
So did he write the movie or he wrote the songs for the movie?
Well, okay, great clarification. He did not write the movie script, but he would create all the songs.
Gotcha.
So basically he was very instrumental in creating the plot of the movie as well because of that. Paramount was obviously all on board with this too. They had it in mind that they were going to take advantage of the success of Holiday Inn as well, and of course the success of the song. So this is what inspired them to move on to White Christmas, the movie. Here's what it said in one article. Riding high on the reception of Holiday Inn, Paramount hoped to repeat their success with White Christmas and considered it a loose remake of the earlier film.
Right.
In fact, the studio opted to use the exact same farmhouse in both pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the point you made earlier, I didn't want to jump into it back then, but you were dead on. I even read an entire article that basically said, it was phrased more eloquently than this, but it was basically like, okay, these two movies are so much alike. Let's try to compare and contrast them to really pull apart how they might differ, because they were very similar. In fact, it was intended that they were going to use the same actors. They wanted, oh yeah.
They just straight up said, let's just redo it.
And put a tiny different spin on it and see if we can't sell it again. Yeah. For sure.
Well, I guess if they didn't have VCRs back then and they didn't have a way to rescreen something, you could just make the same movie and re-show it.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah. New songs, new twist. Yeah. But we're going to save our conversation about White Christmas for our next episode.
Okay.
Armchair Psychologist.
So to end this one, Ashley, I thought I would ask you that part about the song being melancholy, being bluesy. That's intriguing to me. So what are your thoughts about Christmas songs being melancholy like that?
Well, Christmas Eve has always been my favorite holiday, and I'm kind of a melancholy person. I mean, you wouldn't know it from the podcast because, you just wouldn't know it. But I tend to look on the more melancholy side of things. So Christmas Eve to me is still when there's all this hope and all the movies happen on Christmas Eve and there's so much goodness that can still happen on Christmas Day. I get really depressed because it's the end of things. You know, now the decorations are going to come down. Now we go into the dreary January and things don't really pick up in Kentucky, at least until maybe March. So you're looking through this dreary to come. I wish we could keep Christmas lights up through February or till daylight savings ends or whatever, because they just have so much holiday cheer. And I just feel like it's also a time of reflection. What have I done this year? How have I treated people this year? How have I been as a person this year? And sometimes you don't measure up and you think, oh, I should have done better, which is leading into the resolutions and all that kind of stuff. I just feel, I can understand the melancholy of the holidays.
Yeah, that was a really thoughtful response, especially when you just got hit with this question out of the blue. What it made me think about was he had made the comment about other songs being so cheery and so chirpy. And I guess that's true. Like a lot of our songs are very upbeat because they're about the anticipation of Christmas. You kind of named it, right? We have like 6 or 8 weeks of anticipation and the joy and the excitement, and Christmas is coming. And I think White Christmas is more, it taps more into the nostalgia and the feelings and memories of childhood Christmases. And as I think you used the word, or somebody did, longing and yearning.
And some people don't have good memories of Christmas because they don't get along with their family. And they're sad at Christmas because there isn't that family connection and they're going to be alone. And it's just, it heightens whatever emotion you're feeling throughout the year. It's kind of like you repress everything, but Christmas brings it out and makes you face it.
That's interesting. Yeah. I really see why White Christmas is such a lasting classic song. When you stop and think about it, it may be simple, but it does touch your emotions. It really makes you stop. It makes you think. It's just a beautiful song.
It really is. And now that I know that it's stuff about his son, that makes it even more poignant to me.
I agree. Well, let's end on that note, Ashley.
All right. Who would you like to cheers?
Let's cheers to Irving Berlin, the composer of that beautiful song, and to Bing Crosby for doing such a wonderful job singing it.
He did. They used to say that he had a voice of like liquid gold.
It was. In that song, I would agree.
Yes.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
We are back. Today we're going to finish our 2-part focus on White Christmas, and we're going to dig into the film today.
Ooh, that's exciting.
So actually, let's start by just hearing a little bit of your impressions of the movie.
I don't know if you want to start with that.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
So let me just start this show off with a blanket apology to all people who love the character of Betty Haynes. She drives me bonkers. Not Rosemary Clooney. Rosemary Clooney is a lovely woman, and she only said the words that the writer wrote down for her. Not my friend Charlotte, who is a lovely woman who played this character. The written Betty Haynes drives me crazy. She drives me crazy. And I've got a few little, if we get to that, I watched the film a couple nights ago, and I made notes of specifically incidences where she drove me zonkers.
Oh my goodness. Betty, get ready.
Betty, get ready. It's a perfectly delightful film up until the housekeeper overhears. Oh. And that false conflict comes in to play. Because any time that you can have a conversation and it would cure the conflict, it's not a real conflict.
There you go.
That's it.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, now I'm looking forward to hearing you rip into Betty. So okay.
Again, not Rosemary, not Charla, the written Betty Haynes.
Okay. Good. All right. Got something to look forward to.
Yes.
Jumping back in, we spent a lot of time last time talking about the lead-in, right? The creation of the song, how the song elevated to popularity through the troops. It's premiering in the movie Holiday Inn, and now we're ready to talk about White Christmas, the film, the musical itself. And so I'm not sure if our listeners are aware of this, but many articles refer to it as one of the all-time great musicals, one of the most popular, of course, we all know this, holiday movies of all time. But at the time it came out, it was the highest grossing film of 1954. It earned $12 million.
Wow.
It was the biggest hit of director Michael Curtis's career. The co-stars Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye were ranked at that time #1 and #3 box office stars in the country.
Wow. They had great chemistry in the film.
Oh, they did. And the song White Christmas, at that time, the movie came out, was already the most successful song in American history.
Right? That probably helped it a whole lot.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And so what it said in one of the articles was that, of course, we know Irving Berlin had written that song way before, and Bing Crosby had performed it on the radio on Christmas Day of 1941. All of those things had happened, the hit movie, etc. But it was a no-brainer, of course, for Hollywood to capitalize on that. So as early as 1949, which is 5 years before the movie is actually released. The movie White Christmas was already in preparation at Paramount.
Yeah.
And as we've already said, their idea was to just kind of showcase Irving Berlin tunes and reunite the stars of Holiday Inn, Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire, recycle the parts of the earlier film that had worked, but mix in some new stuff. And they were even going to kind of steal some elements from an unproduced musical that Irving Berlin had written before with Norman Krasner called Stars on My Shoulders. And they were going to turn this story into the screenplay. But everything almost fell apart because they had this project envisioned as a trilogy. They were going to have like these buddy musicals starring Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire.
Did Fred retire? Oh, Fred, you broke up the band.
That's right. So they'd already teamed up for Holiday Inn in 1942. They had done Blue Skies in 1946. So White Christmas was supposed to be their third buddy picture. It was supposed to be this big reunion.
Yeah.
But as you just said, Fred Astaire turned the project down.
What, Fred? What are you thinking?
Well, supposedly they're not sure if it was just lack of interest or just concern that he might be getting a little too old to do such a big film like that.
Yeah.
But another source said that Fred Astaire didn't like the script. So I'm not sure
Well,
what the
maybe
truth
me
is.
And Fred will be the only two on this.
He
Maybe
didn't like
he's
Betty.
He didn't like Betty. Because as you're saying this, like, it's the biggest hit in the world. I'm like, well, I can be one person that gets 1,000, I guess.
So what happened was when Fred Astaire backed out, Paramount replaced him with Donald Connor.
That's who I think would be adorable in this because of Singing in the Rain.
Exactly. He had just come out of that. But then he had to pull out because he got sick too close to the production start date. So that's when they turned to Danny Kaye. And according to this author named David Leopold, I guess is how you would say it, Danny Kaye asked for this huge paycheck, $200,000 plus 10% of the gross, thinking that they would turn him down.
And they gave it to him?
They gave it to him.
Good for you, Danny Kaye.
Yeah. So he was in, right?
And wait, you said 10% of the gross? Man, you could retire off of that.
Right. But then they almost lost Bing Crosby too, because in January of 1953, when Fred Astaire decided to back out of the project, Crosby was thinking maybe he didn't want to do the film. He was going to take time off to be with his son following the death of Bing Crosby's wife, actress Dixie Lee. But then sometime later that same month, he decided he would stick it out, and they went ahead and moved forward with White Christmas. Once it started, Irving Berlin felt great about it. He wrote a letter to his friend, Irving Hoffman, and here's a quote. "It is the first movie that I've been connected with since Holiday Inn that has the feel of a Broadway musical. Usually there's little enthusiasm once you get over the first week of a picture, but the change in this setup has resulted in an excitement that I am sure will be reflected in the finished job. In any event, as of today, I feel great and very much like an opening in Philadelphia with a show."
Wow. I bet a lot of that has to do with Danny Kaye because he was just full of energy.
yes.
Full of energy. He really drove he steamrolled through that part.
Yeah, I saw several things in different sources about how much fun he was, always joking, his energy. I mean, I think everybody loved him.
Yeah.
Well, in case you've never seen White Christmas, the movie, which I find hard to believe anybody's
Why would you
never
be listening
seen
to
it,
this?
yeah, right? But here's the IMDb summary. Having left the Army following World War II, Bob Wallace and Phil Davis team up to become a top song and dance act. Davis plays matchmaker and introduces Wallace to a pair of beautiful sisters, Betty and Judy, who also have a song and dance act. When Betty and Judy traveled to a Vermont lodge to perform a Christmas show, Wallace and Davis follow, only to find their former commander, General Waverly, as the lodge owner. A series of romantic mix-ups ensue as the performers try to help the general.
Those are not mix-ups.
Well, to support what you've been saying, there were several people who said they felt the plot was a little thin.
You think?
So again, to fill in a little bit of the gaps, because the general's about to go out of business because there's no snow, the four performers decide they have to put on a show to save the inn, and guess what happens?
It's a success.
Yes. And they get to sing a lot of beautiful Irving Berlin songs. Yeah. An interesting little tidbit is that Paramount chose White Christmas to be its very first movie produced in VistaVision.
I do. I have that in my note. Yes.
Cool.
Opening thing, Paramount presents first picture in VistaVision.
Which was a big deal at the time. It was their widescreen answer to CinemaScope, apparently. And it was such a big deal that the New York Times talked about the technical achievement in its review, saying the colors on the big screen are rich and luminous. The images are clear and sharp, and rapid movements are got without blurring. I mean, they went on about this thing. So I thought I would just share a few little interesting tidbits, trivia, if you will, about the film. I'm going to guess that you probably know some of this, Ashley. So if you want to jump in with anything, you feel free.
Sure.
First little tidbit. Sisters wasn't originally part of the script.
Now, I didn't know that. I knew that the reprise was not a part of the film.
Okay. Actually, that's what I meant.
Oh.
So I just didn't express it well. So
Okay.
tell me what you know about that.
Well, I think that they were goofing off between sets and they were lip syncing it or something, and the director thought it was the most hilarious thing, so he just added it into the script.
100%. It said that Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye were goofing around. And as you said, the director was watching it, loved it. Here's the part that I thought was cute. It said, in an effort to liven the performance up and to kind of, get to Bing, Danny Kaye improvised that moment when he begins to slap.
You can see Bing actually start laughing.
Yes.
Yes, it's genuine laughter.
It said it caught him off guard and he could not stop laughing. And
It's very cute.
It cracked up Danny Kaye a little bit too. And they thought that was the best take. Like they wanted to use it.
Yeah.
So it ended up in there. Another little tidbit, the song Snow was written years before White Christmas. It was originally entitled Free, and it had nothing to do with winter at all. In fact, going back to that idea we talked about before,
It was in his trunk?
Yep, Rosemary Clooney said it was one of his trunk songs,
Ah.
and that he had set it aside, and then he pulled it out of his trunk, and he rewrote it and used it
I
for
wonder
his
if he had
purpose.
a literal trunk or if that was just what he called
know.
it.
I wonder that as well. And then there's another little part in the movie where the Haynes sisters tell Bob and Phil that their brother is working out of the country in Alaska.
Alfalfa?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. That picture, exactly.
Well, why don't you finish the sentence so people know what we mean?
Well, okay. Earlier in the movie, when they are in a scene in the overseas during the war, there's a picture or it's a reference to the dog-faced boy, right?
It's when they're changing clothes. Yeah, they talk about the dog-faced boy. How could he have sisters this good looking? But then they show the picture of him, and it's I don't remember the actor's name, but he played Alfalfa in The Little Rascals.
The point I was going to make here is they refer to being out of the country in Alaska, and that's
yeah,
because
yeah.
the film was released in 1954. Alaska was not part of the
Yes.
U.S. at that time.
Yes.
It was just a territory. So
You were out of the country.
it wasn't until 1959 that Alaska was a state. So think about that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So another interesting tidbit is that they had to change some lyrics for Bing Crosby. Irving Berlin had the song, of course, we know it, Gee, I Wish I Was Back in the Army, and it said something about seeing Crosby, Hope, and Jolson all for free because they were big wartime entertainers. But then when Bing Crosby got cast in the movie, well, that would have broken the fourth wall to have referenced him. It turned into the lyrics we all recognize now, which was Jolson, Hope, and Benny all for free.
That's cute.
Yeah. Here's another one. I've got all kinds of interesting little tidbits from these sources. After the final shot had wrapped, the actors were told that they needed to redo the finale because the King and Queen of Greece were visiting the set and the producer wanted to give them something to remember. So they had to reshoot the entire scene just for the King and Queen, but they didn't have Bing Crosby because he had left to go play golf. And they also didn't even bother to put film in the camera.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, here's a cute thing too. One source said that when Bing left to go play golf, he told Rosemary to cover for him.
Nice.
Yeah.
And, I mean, how big a star are you that you can just, I'm not going to appear for the King and Queen of, what'd you say, Greece? Mm-hmm. I'm going to go play golf instead.
Yeah.
And they let him do it.
Crazy. Just another little tidbit. This will be our last little piece of trivia, and then we're going to take a look at some of the casts. But Irving Berlin was nervous about how the film would be received. It said that he wasn't always on the soundstage, but he would show up every day at the cast recording sessions for the soundtrack, and he would pace so much around the studio that finally they said that Bing Crosby went over to him and said, "There's nothing we can do to hurt this song. It's already a hit," like...
Chill out, bro.
Calm down. Calm down. Okay.
So do you want me to do any of my little trivia for my notes?
Yes, this would be a great time to do that.
Okay, well, I won't go into the character assassination quite yet. I'll just do the trivia stuff. So did you notice that I don't know if you watched the film, but the credits are actually at the top of the show?
Oh.
It's back when they used to do their credits before the film.
did
Now
not
we do
notice that.
we do the credits later. And one of the credits was for Edith Head. Have you ever heard of Edith Head?
I have not.
Well, she'd be a really cool episode because she was a very famous costume designer. But I think later on in her life, she was almost kind of like the lady, the entity that wrote the Nancy Drew stories. She was a real person, but then other people would do the work and it would just have her name on it. So she was very prolific because it wasn't always her doing it. Maybe you're wrong, but that's what I think think I remember. Oh, this may be something to do in show notes. We can post this. Do you remember a long time ago, they used to have a cartoon that had Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra playing chickens? And they would sing they would have singing contests. I don't know.
Not remember.
Okay,
this.
I may have to post this, but I have a memory of this cartoon where they played these crooner chickens and they were trying to get the chickens to lay eggs and who could get which one of them. And I'm almost positive they had a Bing one and they had a Frank Sinatra one. And they were seeing
goodness.
What the girls were just swooning and they were like, blah, 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 laying all the eggs. Also, Bing added the spice to his line. So if you hear, it's kind of like jive talking. He said, a slam bang finish, or this hunk of dynamite. He would add that stuff. Mm-hmm. So he was just doing that.
That was mentioned that Rosemary even commented on it, how much he would ad lib. Yes. And because it was Bing Crosby,
they let him do it.
They let him do it.
Well, he didn't even have to perform for the King and Queen of Greece. So we know where he is, ranks and stuff, higher than the King and Queen of Greece. Vera Ellen's trademark was her high collars. Mm-hmm. Did you know that Betty sang both parts of Sisters?
I read that. I did not know that until I saw it while I was doing
Vera
research.
Ellen just lip syncs it. Mm-hmm. Oh, this was kind of cute. Sisters plays in the background while Judy reads Betty's letter, where she says she's taking a gig somewhere else, and it's just something they're playing in the background. But I thought that was really cute.
That is cute. It's always those little touches that kind of make
That's
it
the last one
special.
I wrote. The rest is about the people.
All right. So just to kind of move through some of the cast members and hit on a few other tidbits that we haven't already talked about. Of course, Bing Crosby, one of the biggest stars, huge, revered. We've already covered him so much that there's not a lot more to add. Just the fact that he basically was the center of the film. And as we've already said, they would either build some of the dialogue around the way he talked or just let him ad-lib and put in his own phrases. In fact,
He had a lot of power.
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rosemary Clooney said that that little monologue when they meet in the lounge and they're having sandwiches and buttermilk was pretty much all improvised by Bing Crosby on the spot.
Wow.
Yeah. He just
And it sounded
did
very conversational.
because it was. He was just being himself. I didn't know this, but somewhere I ran across this little piece of trivia that Bing Crosby's granddaughter happens to be Denise Crosby, who appeared in Star Trek The Next Generation back in the late 80s. And just a little crossover here, Rosemary Clooney's son, Miguel Ferrer, also acted in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. So we have a little Star Trek connection between
space
their,
connection. Interesting.
Descendants. And of course, we all know, moving on to Rosemary Clooney, beautiful singer, obviously, but could not dance.
Really?
That was one of the big things. She would talk about it openly in the interviews. She was very forthright about that. And so if you watch the film, you will see she usually does very little movement, very little dance.
Yes.
The only two real moments were in Sisters and in the minstrel show medley. And they said both times they kept her choreography incredibly simple or gave her props to try to make it.
Oh, is that why they had those cutouts maybe?
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Wow. She must have been terrible then.
Yeah, she really was
I wonder
not
why.
excited about dancing at all.
But did you notice how much they had Vera Ellen dance? I think she danced more than anybody else had a featured moment. Like Bing had a few solos. Of course, Rosemary had a few solos, but I didn't keep count. But it felt like we were constantly seeing her dance more than we saw heard the other ones sing.
And I didn't know this until I was preparing for this episode, but apparently it's because she was considered to be one of the best dancers in Hollywood at that time.
Oh, okay.
Like she was known for this. And I think in the same way that you would have thought of Fred Astaire, like you're going to let him dance, you're going to let Vera Ellen dance.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a big deal. So I thought it was interesting though, the two sisters, one can't dance and the other one can't sing.
Right.
And they pair them up and just
made it
make
work.
this work. But yeah, Vera Ellen played Judy Haynes, while as we've already said many times, Rosemary Clooney was the one who played Betty. And as you said, Rosemary sings for Vera Ellen. The only time we actually hear Vera's voice is when they are disembarking the train in Vermont and they sing the opening lines of Snow.
Oh.
It's actually Vera Ellen who says Snow.
Oh, that must be why when that happened, I looked at Brian, I was like, oh, that sounded weird. That sounded off. So it must be why she must have tried to sing it. I thought it was Danny Kaye, though. I thought, that's odd. I thought Danny Kaye could sing. It just hit my ear wrong.
Yeah, you knew something was off, but
Something
you
was
couldn't quite
off.
tell
Yep.
what it was. For the other songs, it was mainly a lady named Trudy Stevens who did not get credited. They dubbed her in.
The biggest trivia I guess we haven't mentioned is Clooney is her famous nephew is George Clooney.
Yeah.
Just in case
There
anybody
you
didn't
go.
know.
I don't know if he says aunt or aunt, but he calls her Aunt Rosie.
Oh,
Yeah.
not anymore.
Well, yeah.
But he,
Actually,
I can cut that.
Okay. All right, moving on. So as we've said, Vera Ellen was considered to be an amazing dancer. She had started dancing at the age of 10. At 18, she became one of the youngest Radio City Rockettes, and she performed in several Broadway shows before she headed to Hollywood. In fact, here's a little extra I'll give you. Growing up in Norwood, Ohio, which was a suburb of Cincinnati, she actually carpooled to dancing classes with Doris Day.
Oh, I love Doris Day.
Now, about the high collars.
Yes.
A lot of people say that the fact that you never saw her neck was because she had an eating disorder.
I would think so. In one of those outfits, it's the one where she's got the red belt, or it just looks like, oh, that is too cinched. It's too cinched.
That is a lot of speculation says that. However, I did run across Bill Dennington, who is a longtime friend of Vera's, said in an interview very publicly, all of her life she wore something around her neck. A necklace, a choker, a scarf, a collar, etc. It was her trademark, like Van Johnson wore red socks. I saw her neck many times. It was lovely.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So her friend was saying, no.
It's just something she decided to do.
This is just her thing. Yeah. Now, there were huge age differences. Speaking of these characters we've already introduced, Rosemary Clooney, of course, plays Betty Haynes. She's supposed to be the older sister to Judy, played by Vera Ellen. But Rosemary was actually 7 years younger.
Okay.
When the film came out, Rosemary was 26. Vera Ellen was 33. Now, Bing Crosby was the love interest to Rosemary Clooney's character. He was 51 when the movie debuted.
Oh, dear.
25-year age gap.
Yeah, but Rosemary was I don't mean this in a negative way. It's like some of the people back then did not look their age. They looked older than their age. Rosemary looks mature, and in her, I would say like 30, 31, 32, she doesn't look like a 20-year-old. Just maybe it's the style of her hair or the way her makeup is done, but she just looks mature.
I agree.
And it's just people of that era just kind of seemed ageless, like she could be any age.
Well, and editorial comment, I think even today we're too caught up in a number anyway. I mean, it's like, what's believable on a film? And here's another example. The fella, Dean Jagger, who played the retired elderly general, was actually born a few months after Crosby. I mean, they were that close.
Well, now that is one thing I noticed. I thought both of them, Bing and Danny, looked too old for their roles. Bing looks about the same age as the general, and for the general to call him son, and he's smoking his pipe, and it's like, you guys look like you're contemporaries.
Right.
And Danny looked like they should have been about 10 years younger, probably.
Yeah, I agree.
To make that timeline work out.
So Danny Kaye was multi-talented. This fellow was known as not just an actor, of course, but as we saw in the movie, he could sing, he could dance, he was known to be a comedian. And when you look at his career, boy, does he cover a broad...
Prolific.
Oh, goodness, yes. But a few highlights. He was really actually well known for running a radio program. There was a Danny Kaye show that ran on CBS in 1945 and 1946, and it made him become very popular. And then he actually had to kind of leave that radio show because he started touring at the end of World War II on a USO tour.
Okay.
And so they had to get some people to fill in for him. So he did a lot with this tour. And when he came back, he got more into the movies, I think, at this point.
Okay. The thing that I know him from is my mom used to have we have a Christmas albums, the famous Christmas albums that would get put out by the stars. One of the songs on there was Jingle Bells. I think it was Jingle Bells, but it was a tongue twister. He would sing like jingle bell, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is riding one of those open sleigh. And he would say it really fast.
As I was doing the research, I did see that his wife, Sylvia Fine, it mentioned that she wrote many of the tongue-twisting songs for which he became famous. So apparently that was like a big thing for him.
It must have been.
All these tongue twisters. Those were the main actors in the movie. But just to share a few other interesting appearances, Ashley had already shared with us that the dog-faced boy, Benny Haynes, who was brother to the two girls, I just found his name. That's actually Carl Switzer, who played Alfalfa in the original Our Gang, or we may know it as the Little Rascals. There is another interesting cameo by an uncredited dancer. You may recognize at one part in the movie, there's a scene where the Haynes sisters, are dancing with this one male dancer. His name is George, I think you would say it, Chakiris maybe. And he later wins the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor as Bernardo in West Side Story.
Oh, Neat. Okay.
When you look at it knowing that, you recognize them.
Yeah.
Bob Fosse was the uncredited choreographer.
I thought it looked like Fosse choreography.
Right?
I did. That was really cool choreography.
And in case you're not familiar with Bob Fosse, he is the man who later went on to choreograph shows like Chicago, Cabaret, and all that jazz. Very distinctive style. And then, you know what? I just see it in my notes. Actually, you had mentioned it already. Edith Head. She was already an Oscar winner by the time she worked on White Christmas. She was the designer.
Those dresses, those costumes were gorgeous.
It's said that throughout her life, she won 8 Academy Awards for costume design, more than any other individual in that category. And she won for classics like The Sting, Sabrina, and Roman Holiday.
Right, but I would love eventually one day to do an episode about her because floating around in my head, I think there's the thought that she may have been, in some cases, she may have actually designed the costumes, but later on, it may have been more of a group effort, and Edith got the Oscar just because it was her name on it.
Right.
But I'm not sure. I don't want to disparage her unjustly. That just would be an interesting thing to look into.
Who is that author? There's an author who writes adventure suspense books, and now I don't think he even writes them anymore. Now it'll say
His name
with so-and-so.
Oh, that's the with that's doing it.
Right? I can't think of who it is off the top of my head.
Anytime you see a biography and it says with somebody, it means it's being written by the person.
So, awards. The film White Christmas only got nominated for 1 Academy Award. It was for Best Original Song for Count Your Blessings Instead of Sheep, but it did not win.
Really?
Yeah.
Would have been funny if it had been nominated again for Best Song White Christmas and won again.
Yeah, they probably thought that, let's share the wealth. Let's give it to somebody else. This was 1954 that this movie came out. So popular. Do you know the play did not come out until 2000?
No kidding.
I know.
I did not know that.
I did not know that either. I will tell you all that as I was trying to research the stage production, I could not find a lot. It was really hard to find information about the stage production.
Having co-directed it just a few years ago, it is similar but different. There, instead of the housekeeper being named Emma, her name is Martha.
Okay.
But in both instances, and I just remember this clocking it, both instances the housekeeper does not show up until about 45 minutes into the plot.
Okay.
In the stage and the
Movie.
film. Yeah, the beginning is fairly similar. I don't remember a whole lot of differences. Oh, Blue Skies is the end of Act 1. It's a great show-stopping number, and, you only hear it in just a little strains of the music early on. It's been 2 or 3 years since we've done that, so I don't remember a lot of other differences in it. I do remember another big difference is Martha is a more developed character, and she has a wonderful trio, Falling Out of Love.
Oh.
It's really fun song that she sings with Betty and Judy. It's one of my favorite songs in the show.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, here's a little that I was able to find. It said that the stage adaptation of the film, which was titled Irving Berlin's White Christmas, did not appear until the year 2000. It premiered in St. Louis at the St. Louis Municipal Opera Theater, to be exact, on July 17th, 2000. It was performed other places like San Francisco in 2004, but it did not hit Broadway until 2008. And it was just a limited engagement on Broadway at the Marquis Theater. And it started on November 14th, 2008 and ran through January 4th, 2009 for 53 performances and 12 previews.
It doesn't sound like a lot.
No, it doesn't. And of course, after that, I'm assuming it's been out to different theaters such as yours that's performed it. It's a musical in 2 acts. The music and lyrics are by Irving Berlin. The book is by David Ives and Uwal Blake. And of course, it's based on the Paramount Pictures film that we've been talking about for the last however long. You've already told us they're not exactly the same.
Right.
One of the challenges was the fact that the film moved between all of these settings, including a battlefield and a train. So the stage adaptation had to figure out how to deal with that. And then there are a few, as you've already said, deviations in the plot points too. But here is a quote from a principal actor from one of these, original productions who was talking about the play. This is just one person's opinion, of course. The feeling of the movie is absolutely the same, but the script is not the same as the movie. It's all the same characters, but the plot is slightly different. They still go to an inn in Vermont and put on the show in their barn, but the way the storyline unfolds is different. The songs are all the great Irving Berlin songs from the movie, but some of the production numbers are different. Do you agree?
I guess I'm trying to remember. And I thought we did a really amazing job with this show. I thought the dancing was wonderful, but I am trying to remember what is different about it. One thing that I loved in the film and that we replicated, I hope, on stage is there is a song, Love in the Weather, that's added. And it takes place between the two dressing rooms of Bob and Phil and Betty and Judy, and they're singing. But one of the things that happens in the film is one of my favorite scenes in the film is where they're getting dressed. And they talk to each other and just the ease, and they're handing each other everything, and it just looks like something they've done 1,000 times. So for our poor actors, I wanted them to replicate that. I wanted them to actually get dressed on stage, which is something I really like doing if you can. Of course, not down to their underwear or anything, but they would go behind screens if they had to switch their pants or whatnot. But I wanted to replicate that familiarity, and so you really saw the relationship between these two characters. And it ended up being one of my favorite scenes in the play, is just seeing them. It was so fascinating every night because the audience was like, oh, they're really going to do this. Oh, wow, okay. That was a new song. I guess Susan's character was a little bit different. She's younger. She's only about 10 in the play, where she's obviously a teenager. She's has a little bit more to do. The Susan in the movie is just sort of there to look winsome and adoringly at her grandfather, and this one is a little more spunky, and she has a song. And Martha's character, like I said, is more developed, and she has a cool solo. She wants to be a Broadway actor herself. But I don't really know plot-wise, besides expanding Martha, what could be different.
Yeah. So basically, very similar, just little nuances
just
here
little
and there.
nuances, yeah. The thing that's not different is they still made Betty nuts.
We need to hear more about that.
I know.
So one of the things that I remember from watching the performance you guys did, Ashley, because that's the only time I've seen White Christmas performed as
a play.
As a play, as a stage production. I remember the train.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
so
that was
fun,
really cool. The way we
guys
bounced them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to share briefly how you did that?
I think this was Kevin's idea, my co-director. I think he had them bounce up and down so that it would look like they were riding a train, and everybody had to have synchronized movements of when it would move, and they would move their bodies, and that was just very cool. And the song takes place with all the people on the train, not just those 4 characters.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I could tell that it took some careful choreography and a lot of practice, but it definitely was a great visual effect. Well, as I said, I couldn't find a lot, but one of the things that I found about the play that I loved was an article. It was written by David Ives, who is a famous playwright, and he was also the librettist for the musical White Christmas. I had no idea what that word meant. I had to look it up. He wrote the text for the vocal works. So basically, I guess, a lyricist. I guess he had to add more of the words to their songs or to whenever they were doing productions.
Oh, okay.
But I'd never heard that term used before. So anyway, he was in the thick of this. And so he had been watching back in 2004 when they were getting ready to premiere this musical in San Francisco. He was watching the director of that production work with the actors who were playing the male roles, the Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye parts. Bob and Phil, exactly. And I thought what he shared, this insight, was very cool. So this will be just a little bit of reading to you guys, but I think you'll enjoy it too. To set it up first, the 2 actors were struggling. They were doing this scene and they kept rehearsing it. And he said these were amazing actors, but they just weren't getting it right. Like they weren't capturing the feel of it. And so the director stops them and he gives them advice. And so here's what it said. I want to remind you of one thing. This is a pre-neurotic, pre-Sondheim musical we're doing. The year is 1954. Bob and Phil are not interested in their feelings or showing their feelings or showing what sensitive men they are. They're men of their time. They don't want to be sensitive. They want to be decent. They want to help their old army buddy the same way they'd help each other out of a jam without thinking. Forget about Bob and Phil. The scene isn't about them. It's about the general. Now let's try it again.
Yeah.
And this fella who's reflecting says, you could palpably feel a sudden lightening of the mood in the whole room from the 2 actors and from everyone observing in the cast. It was the lightning that comes from revelation. Then lo and behold, when Brian and Jeffrey, those 2 actors, launched back into the scene, it was utterly changed. It was free. It was uncomplicated. It was joyous. And never again did a scene get stuck that way because everyone in the room knew that the director had gone to the heart of White Christmas. From that moment on, the show began to glow.
Yeah, it is about the general. Everything they do is for the general.
Not this particular article, but a different one talked about the importance of the war.
One of Brian's favorite lines, he pointed out, he said, they're looking at the general and he says, we ate and then he ate. We slept and then he slept. And it's just looking at their friend and this person who had taken care of them and their decision that we're going to do whatever it takes to take care of him now.
Yeah, a totally different article that I didn't even really reference in this, but I just remember reading it, was talking about a modern audience that we probably cannot relate as well as people of that generation because we don't have a full appreciation of the suffering and the trauma and what,
I wonder if modern military people identify with this as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. They probably obviously would have a lot more to connect to, but they said the war was just such a part of everybody's life and having to deal with, the after effects and all of it. And that was so central to this. And as you said, the relationships and the appreciation and the love and the way that they were connected to each other. And so I loved the reflection that this man
that was
put
really
out here
insightful.
And what that director said to those actors.
Armchair psychologist.
So that observation actually leads us very nicely into my armchair psychologist question for you, Ashley. What do you think makes White Christmas so enduring today, despite the fact that it's set in a time period so long ago and centers around a war experience that so few of us really do know much about because it occurred before we were born. So why is it so enduring even today?
I don't know if I can fully answer it just because like we've talked about, and I don't know if you want me to go into it now about why Betty drives me
do it. Yes.
So crazy. But okay, let's take my feelings out of it firstly. So I would guess for the people who don't think of the Betty problem, maybe it is that nostalgia, the melancholy, this simpler, sweeter, kinder time where you can kind of look back and it's just a fun show. And the costumes are beautiful. The scenery is beautiful. It's a beautiful film. It's a lovely to look at film. It's very iconic. There's all of these beautiful elements to it. It's hard for me to enjoy it because I can't get past my problem with the character of Betty. Even rewatching it, I loved it up until the point, like I was saying, the housekeeper does that thing where she overhears and she hangs up the phone and then she relays information to Betty, who has just said the night before to Bob that he is one of the kindest, most decent men that she has ever met. She takes this person that she has developed an opinion of who is proven, and they kind of had a frosty start where she seems to have this character flaw where she gets prickly really quickly and she gets offended very easily. And so they have that little thing, but they're still scooting closer to each other and they kind of flirt their way through it. So they fall in love, they have their big kiss, and the very next day, she hears information that is completely against the character of the person that she is falling in love with. And instead of just asking him, hey, I just heard this thing, and is this true? And him going, oh, no, here's what I plan to do. That's literally all it would have taken. She turns into this frosty ice queen, and he tries. Men of that era, usually, not trying to generalize, men of that era typically did not talk about feelings, but he attempts things. He goes, hey, what's going on? Let's talk about this. What's, not a big deal if you were upset about the kiss. It's just a little kiss, tell me what's happening. And she won't do it. She walks away. She will not do it. And anytime that someone is that, she ghosts him, she won't answer him, that's problematic to me. And to me, I'm like, Bing, take all these little red flags and go make yourself a scarf and get out of there, because I think you'd be better off without her. And then something else that she does is she goes to the carousel club, right? She gets this new thing. So she abandons her sister, and they have a contract with the general, remember? He's going to pay them anyway. She leaves in the middle of a contract that is not finished and goes to the carousel club. She figures out what's happening. She leaves that place and goes back to the inn. So Betty has now broken 2 contracts. Betty is a bad business person. Betty does not know how to control her feelings, and she does not know how to resolve conflict. It drives me zonkers. I think Betty just talk to him and figure things out. And you don't need that conflict. We have enough conflict with the show just being, are they going to be able to help the general out? It could just be as simple as that, and just like a Mickey and Judy, let's put on a show, but we had to throw this big monkey wrench in there. The other thing is Danny Kaye and Vera Ellen are all about setting themselves up. And then when they get falsely engaged, Danny Kaye suddenly acts like she's got, I don't know, rabies or something. And he's just like, oh, I don't want to touch you. I don't want to kiss you. Whoa. And then it's like, what is wrong with you all? They're that. That's my problem.
That is so
That's
funny.
a summarization of my problem.
Okay, I'm going to say I've always been annoyed by the whole Betty, the misunderstanding, all of that as well, although I forgave her very easily. But you've brought up an interesting point. I feel like it was orchestrated, right? Like the whole point is the audience needed to see how incredibly decent and wonderful Bing Crosby's character was.
We saw that anyway.
We did. I agree. But I believe that was the idea behind that move on the part of the writers.
Yeah.
And they wanted us to see what a wonderful man he was, and also to show how much it meant to Betty's character. She values morality and decency.
But she's not being decent.
Well, that's the funny part.
She's
is until you said that, it had never occurred to me how ironic it is that she's not being decent herself.
Anytime you have a conflict with another person, and instead of just talking to them and straightening it out, I've had that, in past where you've had something with a friend and they just won't talk to you. Just let's talk about it. Let's straighten it out. Don't be this ghosty ghoster. She's acting a fool. She's just acting like a fool.
Well, I love that perspective because I had never really thought about it that way before. I just was annoyed. By the whole misunderstanding. It was like, come on. But I saw what I thought was the purpose behind it. And I guess that's what I'll say is I think that's one of the reasons why I do think it's enduring is because it's about decency and helping others and self-sacrifice.
Yeah, Bing and Danny have amazing chemistry. And the scene with the general, when they trick him and he comes out and his face and he gets so emotional, I felt myself getting like that swell of emotion with how much this meant to him that his men still came back. And how when he appears on the television, he says, I know it's a lot to ask you, but if you could just come for the general, it's for the general. And those men packed up and they showed up for their general.
Yeah, that's the part that always got me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that actor, the general doesn't have a big part in that movie, but he does such a good job of appealing to my emotions.
Yes, very
and that
much.
Scene with those soldiers, oh my goodness, it gets me every time.
Me too.
In fact, quick funny story. My husband is not a huge fan of musicals. I mean, some of them, especially if he knows the music and he likes it, he'll go for it. But I had convinced him. He'd never seen White Christmas, the film, and they were doing one of the regional theaters at Derby Dinner Playhouse. They were doing several years ago White Christmas, and I convinced him, you will like this. And the military and there's wonderful scenes and etc. Got him to go. Turns out it was a musical review. It was not actually the story.
Oh,
it was not the stage play.
Just songs.
And it was nothing but songs. There wasn't, I don't know if there was a storyline at all. I'm not sure there were 2 lines of dialogue.
I probably would have enjoyed that more because we would have taken the problematic Betty element straight out of it.
My poor husband. But
suffered through.
But when I told him he would like it, I was thinking of exactly what we were just talking about, the relationships and that moment at the end.
One thing is really cute is when Emma, the housekeeper, kisses him, and then she kisses Danny or Phil, and he says his idea, and then she kisses Bob, and then Bob's like, "Woo, come here again." So maybe he should have gone for the housekeeper instead of for Betty, who is not good in business ventures.
Maybe. Well, to wrap things up, I think this is a nice build on that, a nice piggyback. Going back to that same fella, David Ives, who worked with the original production. In that same article, he turned from the story, that reflective story that he shared with us, and he was talking about if you wanted to produce this play yourself, if you were an actor or a theater group that wanted to put this play on, he had advice to give.
Okay.
And here is what he said. If I had any advice to give performers, directors, designers launching into this show, it would be this: outward simplicity and inner generosity. Outward simplicity means not hammering jokes in the contemporary sitcom smirking/mugging manner, but letting laugh lines land as they will, with all the modest ease of 1954. The humor has to come from character, not from knowingness. Inner generosity means making your every acting objective about the other person. Speaking and listening are more important than trying to be funny here because it's humanity that's on offer, not snappy lines. In short, this show can't be played as a musical of today. To work, it has to remain true both outwardly and inwardly to the era the movie it's based on was written in. That's one of the reasons people want to see White Christmas, because they want to inhabit that more innocent world of 1954 for a couple of hours, a world of uncomplicated friendships and simple, open feelings. It's the world of everyone's inner Christmas, where Scrooges are transformed and true love comes wrapped as a gift and snow falls when it's supposed to.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that beautiful?
That is beautiful.
Thought that'd be a good way to end.
I agree.
Cheers to all the people involved with White Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah. And happy Christmas to our listeners.
Yes,
Merry
happy Christmas, happy holidays. Thank you guys for listening to us. Cheers.
Cheers. If you love what we do, please rate and review our show. Or you can become a supporter by making a donation through buymeacoffee.com/scandalwaterpod. Whether a single gift or a recurring monthly donation, it would go a long way towards supporting our work and allowing us to keep the tea brewing.
At our website, www.scandalwaterpodcast.com, you can submit questions or your own story ideas, access our sources and show notes, see the merch we offer for sale, and more. You can join the Scandal Water community through our Scandal Water Podcast Facebook page or follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Scandal Water Podcast.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music. Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.